Start with fire, add oil, let it simmer. From the crew at 58 Surf and Stab, this isn't just a podcast, it's a sensory experience. Fresh from the coast, full of flavor, and prepared to perfection. Well, kinda. This is 58 Surf and Turf. Let's get cooked. All right, 58 Surf and Turf. Here with you, Derek O'Neill.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Really good. Glad to be here and looking forward to it.
We are very happy to have you here on our program.
Thank you.
So tell us about what brings you to Portugal.
Well, I'm here for the WCT at Peniche. My company, I run Vissla in Europe. So my company, Stokehouse Europe, is also taking on the distribution for Europe of the California sunglass brand called IC, who's a co-sponsor here at the event. And so it's kind of like an official launch, and we've had the owners of the company over and, working out a bit of a strategy to move forward. And so far, so good. It's fun brand and, great to be associated again with a high-level WCT event.
Interesting. Yeah, I saw that and I was like, oh, is that because there's so many sponsors that are of this region here, I think, for the European event. But I was noticing IC and I actually went and looked at the website for the first time the other day. I was like, oh, where's this thing based? And saw that it is based out of California. Didn't you guys have De Blanc going that was with Vissla for a bit?
Yeah, look, I mean, I go back a long way with sunglasses. So, I first came over to Europe 1989. I bought Billabong over here, started Billabong in Europe. But at the same time, there was many brands starting up and I would have a lot of people approach me to, is this guy any good? Is that guy any good? Or even to, do a lot of different products ourselves. So we had another company that had a number of different brands. We had Arnett for England in the very early days, the absolute, unbelievable days for sunglasses with Arnett. We were the first distributors for Nixon in Europe. Had Globe shoes for both England and for France, and that was, really strong. And then in 2003, I got appointed as CEO of Billabong. And as part of that, we acquired a lot of different brands while I was CEO. One of those brands that we had in the group was Von Zipper, which came out of when Arnett got sold. Basically, half the management went and formed Von Zipper, and the other half went to Electric. So that was, great.
At least they found new jobs quickly.
Yeah. So, Von Zipper, I worked, we had that under the Billabong umbrella for, a long time. It's still there today. I finished up with the Billabong group in 2012, but, when we started Vissla in 2014, we also at that time, started the Blanc sunglasses. More recently, the market's changed so much that those sort of mid-level glasses it's a tough business. IC have cracked the code, let's say, of being able to do glasses really exceptional quality for, a great price point. Those retail for 39, 49 euros in here and, sort of $30, $40 in the USA. And, the market, the brand's just going gangbusters. So we're really happy to be involved.
Nice. Yeah. Well, you just went through the history a bit there. We have a lot to get through. I understand. I mean, you said that it was 1989 when you brought Billabong over here, but you had some experience in the surf industry at that point already. Yeah. Wasn't it a trip over here that kind of sparked the move in general? Like, didn't you come over for maybe some snow and then?
Yeah, well, actually, I was working for Piping Hot in Australia. And Piping Hot, it's, companies get bought and sold. I was a sales manager in Victoria for Piping Hot, started as a rep, then became sales manager. Piping Hot was great at that time in the late 80s. It was pretty well the number 2 wetsuit brand in Australia and starting to move into global markets. So that was just great. I mean, we had amazing surf talent. Gary Elkinen, Ross Clark-Jones, Mark Sainsbury, Munga Barry in his early days. It was just fantastic to be a rep in the surf industry in the 80s in Australia, and that was great. Unfortunately, the company got sold and everybody got fired virtually the next day. Bought out by a company that didn't really understand the surf business and thought that they could, just move a bunch of people that really didn't have any affinity with surf, but, you know, were more corporate. The brand looked like it was, you know, going to struggle. I took the opportunity to go to Europe. My father was born in Scotland. I was, you know, always wanting to go to Europe was my real opportunity, and I did that. You know, very quickly realised that I needed to do something, and I basically ended up in England and worked in a few surf shops in Newquay, in Cornwall.
Okay.
But that I came down to, you know, was never really a competitive surfer, but I surfed in a few EPSA events. Came down for the Billabong Pro 1989 with Australia. We organised a loose contest, EPSA, and at Mundaka, and you know that was amazing. And I just thought, well, there's a real opportunity in Europe, you know, for surf brands to get established. Quicksilver and Rip Curl were really already here, beat us by a few years, and there was demand for Billabong. I mean, they just couldn't get it. So you know, it was quite interesting to, you know, the market was ready to expand it.
Nice.
And so you know, I thought England wasn't the right place for that, so we moved to Hossegor and started from Hossegor in early 92 and just had pretty well immediate success.
Got it. So was piping hot your first job in the surf industry, like you said, as a sales rep initially?
Yeah. I used to work. My father was a plumber, and you know, I worked in construction with him. You know, thought that's what I was going to be. I made the Victorian team for the Australian titles and went to the Australian titles in 1986 in Margaret River, and that was sponsored by Billabong. And you know, it was a fun time, and it just seemed like the Billabong guys, you know, Vince Lauder and some of the marketing guys at Billabong would look like they were the ones who were having the most fun at the event. I just thought, wow, have a look at this surf industry. This is amazing. I wanted to do whatever I could to get into it.
Yeah. And
I just, you know, these days when, you know, you'd look in the newspaper for job ads, you know, and about 4 months later I saw a sales rep's job at Piping Hot. I tell you, I almost freaking swam across the bay in Melbourne to get down to Torquay and interview for the job. And I was like holding my fingers for 2 weeks hoping I was going to get the job.
Wow. So you were living in Melbourne? Did you grow up there?
Yeah, I grew up in country Victoria, but I came down to Melbourne when I started doing sort of amateur surf contests. Yeah. Just easier, you know, better waves. I've always chased waves my whole life. Been a surfer since 11, so.
How'd you start?
I just lived at the beach and, you know, with a bunch of mates, and, you know, it seemed like a great thing. Skateboarding in those days was pretty strong, and, you know, we're all trying to skate like surfers, and you know, it was just a natural thing, you know, a bunch of us, you know, Christmas holidays, you know, camping at the beach. So, you know, start surfing. I think I spent 2 years in the whitewater, you know.
Yeah.
But it was just fun.
Yeah.
You know, fun times.
When did you start to appreciate, like, coming from that area and just knowing how much it's contributed to surf history? I mean, having Rip Curl, Quicksilver, just some of these early surf brands coming from, you know, a small Victorian town. Yeah. When did that start to, like, I mean, obviously when you're 11, you wouldn't get that, but was it like when you started looking for jobs, or when did you start to realize that it was a special place for?
I first visited Torquay when I was about 18. I went over and watched the contest. Okay. And I was just completely fascinated. It was, you know, just amazing to see. It just felt, I thought at one stage I was going to be an Australian rules professional player, but I never, you know, really made it through the country league. So surfing, you know, kind of took over really everything, all my thoughts in my life. Actually, the reason why I stopped football was if the wind was offshore and I was playing football, I was thinking, wonder what surf's like now, instead of concentrating on the game. So, but going to Torquay was like a shrine, you know, seeing the brands. You got to remember, back in the late 70s, it wasn't at all like it is today. But you know, Rip Curl was there, Piping Hot was there, Quicksilver was there. You know, you were seeing surf stars. You know, I probably read every surf magazine that I could, you know, get my hands on from the age of 14 on. So, you know, knowing, you know, you knew all those Hawaiian guys. You know, when I first saw Jeff Hackman at Bell's, you know, that was, oh my God, look, you know, these sort of legends that were coming through, Dane Kealoha, you know, people like that was just crazy. And then our local board riders club did a contest in Sydney, you know, kind of like a group contest against Newport Plus and Maroubra, and, you're seeing guys like Tommy Carroll and Dougal Walker and some of these, guys that have, been surfing at Pipeline Masters, things like that. It was just incredible, and then to be able to, work in Torquay, that was like, for me, the pinnacle. Really, It was just, as a young kid, that was just amazing. It was really, really strong impression on me, because if I wasn't surfing, I was hanging out at Trigger Brothers Surf Shop. I just like being around, just hanging out. And everything. People come and, it's where you found out what the waves were like. You just, that's what we did.
Yeah.
So I always liked being around surf.
I got it. So early days of the job at Piping Hot as a sales rep, did you feel like you picked up the skills pretty quickly? You obviously knew surfing, but in terms of actually sales as a skill, did you find that you could do that pretty quickly, or was there a bit of a learning curve?
I didn't go to university. I didn't have a degree. I actually have an honorary degree from Plymouth University now for their surf science course. However, at that time, I tried to get my education from people that knew more than what I did. Therefore, I would go in with the accountant, the accounts team, and find out why they would ship that client before the other client. I'd learn about margins. I'd learn about profitability. I'd learn about product. Ultimately, the product. Why did one t-shirt have to be $30 and another one could sell for $25? Ultimately, what about tariffs? What about taxes? What about import duties? What about how did you set up a line? What pricing did you want to have it? How much were you prepared to spend on marketing? Did you charge the client shipping costs? All these sort of things were, to me, just a learning curve, and I just asked a million questions. And I think at that stage, certainly, I must have drove people crazy, because and I say it today, I can learn more in my business from the warehouse guys than I probably can from a sales manager, most days, because I can see what's shipping out. I can see what's going on. I can see right now what's happening. And so I felt that every person in that company could teach me something. And I still, actually live to that today. It's still true. I learn things every day from my staff.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And all right, so a million questions later, a good job at Piping Hot. All of a sudden somebody buys it.
Yep.
It goes south. You go on that trip, and then you said before that you had this sense that, hey, Billabong will work in Europe. Somebody just needs to do it. At a high level, what does that look like? Is this one thing that, it makes sense in theory? Hey, this stuff is cool. Everybody's wearing it. This is an awesome brand. What does setting up a company in Europe mean at a high level?
We started with 3 employees. I had another Australian guy, Reed Pinder, from the Sunshine Coast, helped me from day one. I got we were kind of working a little bit with Rip Curl at that time, as our sort of French distributor, but I quickly took that back out of them. And then, we just, at that stage, we were doing a lot of production out of Australia. We were making t-shirts in Europe, and printing t-shirts in Europe, but buying fleece from different parts of the world. But at that time, Billabong Australia had a lot of their own sewing machinists making board shorts, making shorts, making product, which we would import from Australia.
Okay.
And so, but like I said, people were ready for it. I was never a designer. I think I can tell if something's going to sell or if it's not, but I've never been a designer. I can't start with a blank sheet of paper and, design something that I think is going to work, but I can see if something's probably not going to work, or maybe, if it needs a little twist. But what we were able to tap into was this amazing stream of talent coming from Billabong in Australia, that where they were designing product that was really working for surfers, because all we ever thought about was what's going to work for a surfer. Ultimately, what's going to work for a surfer. And you talk about setting up a company and things like that. I wasn't a financial expert. We had a Billabong Australia technically owned the company, so they provided the finance for the very first year.
Yep.
But we paid them back after the first year, and after that, banks were ready to support us because the product was that good. There was a customer ready for it. They wanted that authentic type brand product. And Billabong at the same time was doing, major surf events in Hawaii. There was the Billabong Pro, in the early 90s in Hawaii. the 5A contest, there's a couple of pipe contests, and it had amazing surfers, Ockie coming through, Luke Egan, Sonny, some really great surfers on the team. So it really wasn't, it was just a case of don't screw it up. You've got great product, get it out to as many surf shops, core surf shops as you can. They've got to pay, so they don't pay. That it's going to end pretty quickly.
Sure.
So I never zoned in on those financial points too hard. Probably the best thing I learned though was that I needed to employ people that were much better than me in those areas. And if I could find people that knew 150% of the job, then I didn't have to worry about it. I just had to make sure I had their trust.
Sure.
And that, they had my trust. So on those sides, it was really just a case of, putting the jigsaw puzzle together, but you had the tools, and I surrounded myself with great people. Sometimes I think I'm a bit of a fraud, because really, it's most of the other people that did the work. I think I've been good at delegation.
There you go.
Hey, I want you to do that.
That's a skill. Come on.
Yeah. So set the direction and let people go. Not everyone's going to go in the same path that you would go, but ultimately, as long as you get to the point where you want to get to, then I think it can be okay. And if I'm a great one, if you make a mistake, did you see that you made the mistake? Did you recognize it? Did you fix it? If you can't fix it, did you make it again? Usually if you make it a second time, then I'm starting to have a few words. If you make it a third time and it's really bad, then, we may be better off you go to work somewhere else. But ultimately, give people a bit of rope and let them run with it.
Got it. So had you visited Europe before you kind of felt like bringing it over? That was the first trip. You're like, hey, this would work here. There's a lot of surfers.
This would work here. A lot of surfers. And, in those days we had a loose agreement, basically. We formed a group in Europe called Eurosema. So I'm a co-founder. I'm the only one still working in the industry, but, with people like Francois Payot from Rip Curl and Harry Hodge from Quicksilver. And we formed a group because at that time, there wasn't a huge amount of surf shops. It's super important to see your product sold in a great surf shop. That's a fantastic marketing tool. That's really, really important. I'm a great believer that, some of the stores that you see surf in today are not quite great for either your brand or the industry. Not that everyone really cares about the industry, but I believe that the retailer brings something, to kind of a key partnership. So, and I love surf shops. I don't want to hang out in a tennis racket shop or something like that. But
that doesn't sound very fun.
No,
I don't think
but
Bobby Martinez once said either.
There you go. But I love surf shops. You smell the wax, you go handle the boards. It's the feel, the pulse, the whole thing about it. We were talking at the time that, it was better for us to have, it was certainly better for Quicksilver to have Billabong in the store than it was to have some, jeanswear brand that, were dominant in France at the time. And therefore, in a lot of cases, the rep would go and go, hey, have you checked out Billabong? You should maybe get some Billabong in your store, like it would make your store better. And, those things really kind of helped. Those things don't really happen anymore, but certainly in Europe in the early days, it did. And we had, rapid growth. We went from 3 employees to 350 in 10 years. So, it was a fantastic growth, big growth.
That's a lot of growth. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot more people.
Yeah. But surf just became
at the peak that you guys paddle out at lunchtime, though. That sounds a little bit intimidating.
Well, look, people talk about how crowded surf is today. I can tell you it was pretty crowded 30 years ago too.
That's good to hear.
A lot more aggressive guys in the water probably 30 years ago as well. A lot more territorial guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just timing. Timing was good. If I was arriving now, maybe the timing wouldn't be as good. If I arrived 15 years earlier, the timing wouldn't have been as good. But the timing was just right. I've had a charmed life in that respect. Timing good, but great brands to be associated with, surround myself with great people, and that's been a major part of it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Business aside, was it intimidating to move to France?
Oh, the language. I'm still struggling with it. It's I don't think it's anything you absolutely perfect. I have an Australian wife. We speak English probably 70% of the time in the company, but I love the culture in France. I love the language. I mean, I really do. But then you come to Portugal. I've been, I helped Paulo get established with Billabong down here in Portugal. At the very early days. I think I made 30 trips down here, and I don't think I could name 5 Portuguese words. I've got restaurant Spanish, but you go to Germany, and a lot of people in Europe speak 3 if not 4 languages. So having 2, you feel a bit of a dummy, but overall. But look, I mean, the surf culture spread pretty quickly. Portugal in particular, it's such a strong surf market because there's a lot of cities that are close to the beach. If you look in France, for example, there's no cities really close to the beach at all. In Australia, Sydney, the Gold Coast, has about 500,000 people. I mean, fantastic ways on the doorstep. But, in France, for example, Hossegor has about 8,000 people. Biarritz probably 25,000, but no 3, 4, 5 million people. Lisbon's a pretty big city, and there's beaches all around. Portugal's been it's been that country that for me is probably surf's got probably the highest profile in Portugal than almost anywhere I've ever seen. Australia at various times, but certainly surf in Portugal's right high, really high up on the whole overall map. So I always love coming down here.
Yeah, it is pretty incredible the amount of attention it has here. I spent time with Saka. He's just like a celebrity.
Well, I mean, Saka, I first surfed with him at 14 at Kosh's. Paulo said, "Hey, have a look at this kid." It was amazing. We took him on, and he was in Billabong for 12, 13 years.
Yeah, and then Pierre got you.
And Pierre, well, I love Pierre. I had a great relationship with Pierre, but yeah, on that one, Pierre got me. In fact, he called me up and said, "Listen, I've just got to do it." And I'm like, "Okay, well, when Pierre got his checkbook out, that was it."
Tiago was telling me the little bidding war story. It's a fun one. Yeah. Had you been in bidding wars like that?
It was more Reed at that time. So he was more just, telling me what was going on. And look, at that time I felt that Quicksilver, needed a higher profile presence in Portugal, I mean, Billabong had really dominated Portugal for a long time, and arguably still does, even though, I haven't been involved with it for 10 years, For me, I have, some pride in it where Billabong still sits in Europe, having started it and, run it and, been involved with Billabong for, almost 25 years.
Yeah.
But
building it here? Yeah,
building it here. So, ultimately it's, great to see the presence that it's, still got within the market,
Yeah.
But yeah, Quick were great competitors, are fantastic competitors. For me, when, in the last 7 or 8 years when, the board riders group formed and Billabong and Quicksilver joined together, I just couldn't comprehend that because, I mean, we were always ultra competitive, there'd be global meetings and, we were just strategizing basically, how we would, meet the challenge. The websites, for example, when we would have, I remember one of the early live websites we had at Mundaka, Billabong Pro Mundaka, tiny little 2.5-inch black and white, screen on dial-up in the middle of your computer. And, we got it was a guy, Quirin Rodler was one of the commentators, and we just, day 2, we said, "Hey, I got a call from Gordon Merchant in Australia, and he said, "Hey, the beach announcer just keeps talking Spanish and Basque and, Portuguese, and, I don't want to hear that, So we just went to our, web guys say, hey, listen, can we plug a microphone in and have someone talk? And they go, yeah, let's give it a try.
And you found a German guy to do it.
Yeah, so we did. Well, he had different languages.
Yeah, no, he's a great guy.
And we had him there, and but Mundaka, sometimes there's 15 minutes between sets.
Yeah.
And you've got no other cameras. It's just one camera, and you just filming two guys sitting there.
Yeah.
And
it's just him, so he can't ask questions to a co-host or anything. He's just.
So then we're, a couple of days later, we're like, hey, could we record an interview with someone and maybe plug that in for 2 minutes when there was no, just the audio, things like that. So I was learning along the way, and then the next event, Quick would do something, and then the next event, Ripcore would do something, and you go, oh my God, well, look at what they've done. We'll do something else,
Yeah.
Sterling Howland, who's at, Bolter now, had an amazing, successful career with Bolter. He'd come up with, hey, we'll do this, we'll do that,
Yeah.
It was just great days,
Awesome.
We were building,
You think that sense of competition and rivalry is just great for the industry as a whole?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because you had to keep improving.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had to keep improving. Product, wetsuits, everything,
Nice.
Yeah.
So you've talked about, identifying the opportunity for Billabong over here, and you've brought other brands, like you said, as well. You've been involved with a ton of brands. How would you describe, especially I feel like we live in a day and age where you take a product like a t-shirt, people are pretty aware of that being not a super complicated product to make. What would you say are some of the biggest factors in determining the strength of a brand, especially in the surf industry?
Basically, I like to break business down into a pretty simple sort of equation. The reality is that you have a product, and you determine how much can it sell for. You might want to sell it fairly cheap to try and drive a lot of volume, but at that point, you might not make enough money to cover the costs of, making the product or your staff to sell it, and your warehouse and your electricity and, everything has to come into that as well. So, what's the marketing things you can do to try to get people behind your brand so that you can achieve the level of sales that you need to make your brand sustainable? Because while it's never guaranteed at all that you're going to be profitable, and in fact, far more companies start up and fail than start up and succeed. But in reality, you need to try and make your business sustainable so that you will be able to continue to be in business, continue to improve your product, continue to excite people. You invest in contests, you invest in athletes, you invest in many, many different things to try to create excitement for your brand so that your brand remains sustainable. Profitability is not a dirty word when you consider that if you are unprofitable for years, at some point the doors are going to close, and that's not a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So ultimately, you try and find the balance. Billabong, particularly through the early 2000s, we were the most profitable surfwear company on the planet by a long way for 10, 12 years. It was an incredible time, and you understood at that time we were able to reinvest back into, amazingly successful events. We were able to resurrect the Tahiti event, and we felt that we just lifted that to another level. We were able to have, amazing athletes on the tour, well supported. At one stage, we probably had over 250 surf athletes, that we were able to support it, from absolute, bottom level right through to, the top end pros and still be a, very successful, sustainable business. So the ability to make that basic t-shirt sing is, is a key part of it. So, introducing new washes, introducing new printing techniques, something to have rack appeal so that, it's interesting. Not doing things that torpedo your brand, that's also important. You want to make sure that your brand is you want it that a surfer is at least considering your brand as an option when they're thinking about buying a t-shirt.
Yeah.
It's not essential. Let's face it. Not that many people need a new t-shirt tomorrow. So, you have to try and have, a strong appeal around your product. And if you at least can be considered in the mix, then you've done your job. After that, it's really the customer who's going to decide.
Yeah.
You can do whatever you want in design and all the tricks and everything. And in the end, the consumer decides. We've all been in the industry where we think, well, we're just going to do this and do more of those. And the consumer just turns quickly and, suddenly you're left with, a lot of product and, which creates another problem. So it's a lot of work. You throw a lot of darts, not all of them hit the board. Ultimately, you just hope that, enough of them hit the board so you can, back it up for next year.
Nice. How did it feel to, you had so much time at Billabong and were such a driving force behind the brand's success. And then that concluded, and then you found yourself a few years later starting a new brand.
Yeah, well,
playing darts again.
Yeah.
Was that intimidating? Did you think you were going to be out of the game and this opportunity?
Yeah. Look, I had a bit of a year off. I had a non-compete for a year, so I couldn't really, officially go and work for anybody. But at that time, there were, it was a big change went through Billabong at that time. There was big changes in management. I think the focus went a little more into their own retail. There was, a lot of things going on. New owners, it was still a public company, but it was really a lot of major sort of investment decisions made that, and a lot of people left, and a lot of those people were available and interested in continuing to do things. I thought I could retire, but actually I couldn't really retire in the way that I would have liked to have had to do, let's say. So, doing something else was starting to get more and more interesting. Paul Nadee was having, the same thing. Paul was running, was the general manager of, all the Billabong brands in North America. And Paul had also been out of there for quite a while. And, I called him up, go, hey, what are you doing? You must have something cooking. And yeah, come around, we'll have a bit of a chat, And personally, I've never really been, I never thought of myself as the guy to start a brand. I said, I'm not a designer. I'm not sitting there, tinkering around thinking, what's new, what can I do now? But, I felt that, Paul is more of that guy, and therefore, when he was saying, hey, I want to start a new brand. And I was really, I'd been back in Australia for 10 years at that time, and I loved Hossegor. The surf's amazing. I really had loved Hossegor. I didn't particularly want to leave there. When I got appointed as CEO, I was more than happy in Hossegor, but I had to move back to Australia, and I was ready to go back to France. So, I've been back there for 10 years, run Vissla in Europe, and it's been great. It's
nice.
So yeah, it's I was there at the start, but I'm not creating. Again, there's an amazing team in the US, and we've got a design team in Europe as well. Designing a lot more of the winter type product, and it's a good mix. Market's a bit of a grind at the moment. It's not after COVID. It's not like it was sort of before COVID. There was a little burst there for a year where everyone decided to go surfing.
Yeah.
So it's not quite as fun as maybe in some of the other years, but markets always go through a bit of a up and down curve, and I think, we're probably at the lower point. I would like to think of, we'll see a bit of a curve up again over the next couple of years. There's still a huge amount of people surfing in Europe. So, that's not going away anytime soon.
No, it's not.
I'm sure you've seen.
Yes, I have. I've seen very many of them.
Yeah.
So you talked before, you mentioned that, there was a point where it was unfathomable to think that a bunch of the brands could be under the same umbrella as they are now.
Oh, it's just different. You know what I mean? It was hard to comprehend how that would kind of work. And I think it's still a bit like that today. It's a lot of changes in the surf industry over the last few years. Be interesting to see how it all comes out in the wash. I'm a interested observer on the side, let's say.
Yeah. But I did want to ask, like, with a lot of those sitting on the same roof, and with when it came time to start Vissla, and I know you said Paul was more of the person who would play with that sheet of paper and have a vision for the brand and all of that. But what were the conversations like around like this space that you would occupy in the broader surf industry?
Well,
as a new brand,
late 2013, 2014, it felt like brands were trying to be everything for everybody. You had, Vans had sort of come back, were obviously in skate and in surf and longboard surf and, different things. Volcom were, they surf, they skate, the snow, Quick's got snow. And, it was really, I thought, a confusing time. Like, let's just have a men's surf company. We're not skate. It's just men's surf, because surf is fun and that's what we knew. Let's have a surf company. Do product that was technical for surfers. So great board shorts, great wetsuits, things that surfers needed. Let's get back to the basics. And so that was the space we decided to occupy. And I don't think that's changed for us.
Nice. Stuff for surfers.
Yeah, stuff for surfers. Not all surfers like our product, and that's fine. Ultimately, everyone's got their favorite brands. Some guys chop and change. There's guys that have been, rusted onto Rip Curl for 20 years, and great, fantastic, But as long as you're in the mix, I think that retailers were, well, not all retailers, but retailers were thankful for something new and fresh. This industry needs, or surf shops need, new brands, coming through. We really like to work now with, we've got a number of stores with Florence, as we like that brand. But we like sitting in stores with brands like, former Florence, smaller, younger brands. It's giving some new energy to surf shops, and we think that's a good curve, and we're actively promoting that.
Nice.
Yeah.
And speaking with you in the past, and even reading stuff of little interviews and stories on you, I've got the sense that you talked about it for product and for the brand itself, but I heard that the culture you try to create in your places of work are very surf centric as well. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, look, it's important. I mean, not everybody works at our company has to surf, but it's important. I mean, if you're talking about surfing, and it all ties back to that, then you want to try and have a lot of people that can relate to it. I think one of the problems in the industry, and I'm probably going to get 100 CVs out of this, but one of the problems in the industry at the moment is that there's just not enough super smart young people that want to come through the surf industry. When I say super smart surfers, I mean, they're to be honest, if they're smart enough, they've probably gone and started something of their own. Today with online, you can create product from some of these online marketplace suppliers and start your own brand. You can see pretty quickly whether you're going to be successful or not. I mean, people approach me all the time for startups, and I say, go and print 100 t-shirts and see if any of your friends want them. I'll soon tell you whether you're that you can start as low as that.
Yeah.
But in reality, the industry, it's time for a bit of a refresh. I'm my generation's, we're on the way out, but yeah, when I started Billabong Europe when I was 26, it doesn't seem like, there's those crew around, as much anymore. And,
wow, you're 26.
when I get some of those, people, I try and, do what I can to, bring them into the company and teach them, as much as I can. If doesn't always work. And, sometimes that, they quickly to go somewhere else because, they've suddenly got a new learning curve. But, that's what the industry needs. It's good. It's great. Surfing's a young game.
Yeah.
It should be, Old guys like me should be gone. Yeah, so come on, someone, come and take over.
Any advice to somebody who's looking to get started in the surf industry?
Look, I mean, there's loads of ways. I mean, I loved working in a surf shop. I loved it. Selling surfboards, helping people with, wetsuits, technical gear, way back. That was just, to me, it was fantastic. I've been able to get some of the better people, that we've had in the industry, out of retail. And I'm always, looking for smart people that, have come through retail because, like I say, you soon find out. I encourage a lot of our staff to go out, in our stores and go and see what's happening because, they learn something straight away.
Yeah.
Customers are not always right, but nearly always.
Most of the time.
Yeah, and if you can't find a customer for your product, you're done pretty quick. So it's it's at the coalface. It's really, that's where you learn. So yeah, I mean, through surf retail and then try and see for openings inside brands. My view is that in the next few years, I mean, the way the industry is going right now, industry's let a lot of people go in the last few years. I mean, I would say in some of those brands that there's going to be new opportunities opening up because, a lot of cases, the key, I won't say authentic people, but some of the DNA is gone, and it'll be good. It'll be a good time almost for people to sort of join the industry. I reckon there's a new resurgence coming over the next 10 years, and some of the new brands will be, a key part of that. I'm super excited to have Florence in some of our stores. I love that brand. I mean, amazing product, and amazing people that create it and work there. So all strength to them.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree with you that I think that there's been so much change that there is going to be a need for young people with big ideas and passion.
Yeah, I mean, look, the media changed, so a lot of really skilled people came through surf media, and ended up in the brand sometimes, but also they brought a lot of the brand inspiration to the table as well, and helped promote the whole lifestyle and everything. So there's arguably opportunities, through new media, through, all the athletes now have to be their own promoter. They have to be their own editor. They have to be their own, basically today, if you have an athlete, you're paying an athlete quite a lot of money. As there's different media now, and, it's not like, before you would have, 8 double spreads going in, different surf magazines in different countries every month. Today, the athlete has to be actively promoting themselves, or to be honest, why would you don't really need them, as part of your brand. So, the athlete, and, we know guys that have worked that out, there are guys that have worked that out, times 10, and therefore, that game's changing. Those athletes are going to need people around them to help them with that, content. And,
so I have friends in those roles.
There you go. There you go. So, just think of where that's come in 5 years. And where it can be in 5 years' time. And therefore, there's going to be, smart young crew out there that are going to, work a lot of those things out. It'll be different in 5 years' time. So, some of that's going to be created by some of these young crew that are eager now.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see where it's going to go.
Good point. Yeah. Really good points.
Yeah.
I've only got a few more questions for you.
Sure.
But this one is, I've heard that you have an interesting story about signing Lane Beachley. Can you elaborate on that?
Oh, no, I didn't. Well, not signing Lane. No, Lane was a Billabong for a long time.
Uh-huh.
Look, I loved Lane. Lane, we had, I think, I can't even remember exactly. I think she was 14 or 15, Lane, when she first joined with Billabong. Unfortunately, Lane wanted to go and start her own clothing brand, and she did. She went and started it. But we had a girls' clothing brand at Billabong called Billabong, and Lane was our key athlete. When she wanted to go and start her own brand, left us in a pretty big hole. Actually, we didn't really have sort of a backup plan. Lane's been able to extend her whole, career by, her role in Surfing Australia and, her ambassador type roles, her charity that she had for such a long time. I mean, she's amazing. And we had great times with her. She, was with her clothing brand, it's just probably just got the timing wrong. Maybe a couple of years earlier it might have worked a little better, or maybe a little bit later. Like I've said, timing is really a key part. It was kind of around that time, 2008, 2009. You started having financial crisis things. Sometimes retailers sort of shrunk back, and it was a different time, but she was amazing for Billabong. In fact, she put Billabong women's on the map. At Billabong girls, the girls line, we were well behind Roxy for a long time. What Roxy created. I take my hats off to the team there. Particularly through the early work with Lisa Anderson. It was just amazing, and we were, running behind for such a long time. Billabong Australia actually, girls line in Australia became really, really, really strong, and Lane was at the top of that. At one stage, at Billabong, the sales were virtually neck and neck between girls and guys in Australia.
Wow.
And there were some retailers that were buying more girls than guys.
Yeah.
I think we always saw ourselves as a men's brand, but that was, interesting in itself. And Lane was a key part of that. We had her on posters, everywhere, and she was great to work with. She was great. She was ready for a shoot. She was ready to do something. A lot of the guys didn't really tie back that you were kind of working for the brand, but she understood that.
Yeah, there are some people that don't quite get that.
So I loved working with her, and it was a bummer actually when she left and did some other things. And left us in a hole for years. We didn't have a real high profile backup. And we felt it. For quite a few years.
Wow,
left a big impact.
So one individual can have that much impact on a brand. I mean, maybe
you can.
Kelly.
Yeah, Quick and Kelly was just 20 years of dominance. That was super strong. I don't think. So I've got a theory, and I'm sure someone could prove me wrong, but for me, I don't think there's been another sport that sold as much apparel globally as surfing ever. And you'll think about Lakers and, their merch, but really that's, it's related to their team jersey, the singlet, etc. You can picture it. But in terms of lifestyle, surfing, there's not another sport, not soccer or football, not AFL, not rugby league, not tennis. I'm talking really, related to the sport and brands. Billabong, Quicksilver, Rip Curl, have done billions of dollars for 30 years based around surfing. And, and probably the key athlete behind that was Kelly.
Yeah.
I don't know how many billions of sales Kelly was responsible for.
Quite a few, you'd have to imagine.
Absolutely, and just that statistic in itself. Surely someone, it's probably AI somewhere that can, do the calculations on how much it was. But Billabong, we were, at our peak, we had 1.7 billion Australian sales, 1.2 billion US sales. Quicksilver was over $1 billion in sales.
And that was annual?
Annual sales. Yeah. But for years and years and years, So, there's, Rip Curl's doing sort of, even today still doing sort of $300 million of sales, and have been doing it for the last 20 years, Ultimately, like I said, I don't think there's been another sport, and, Kelly's right at the top of the tree of that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've never thought of that. And even if you think about the other sports, you don't buy it like you're buying apparel. You might buy a jersey that you have for a few years.
Yeah, I went to a Lakers game, I got the Kobe shirt, you know what I mean? But I'm not wearing it around, at the barbecue next Saturday, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there was one stage with Billabong. I mean, it was kind of crazy, but at one stage with Billabong, the sales we had in Australia, I think I calculated that Billabong were getting something like $40 for every man, woman, and child in Australia, with a population of about 21 million or something at that time.
That's incredible.
It was, at that stage, it was too much. It couldn't be sustained. You learn that too. You know what I mean? There's a point where,
at that point, are you still thinking about chasing growth, or is it just, hey, let's see how we can sustain this?
How you can sustain it.
Yeah.
We were adding brands, so we were able to, kind of, let's say, calm this one down. And, we added some amazing brands, Ruka, Nixon, Decline, amongst others. We had Element. I mean, so you could, at one stage kind of, boost some others up a little bit. But I mean, managing it all, was pretty tough. And then, you had the financial crisis just pull the rug out from, banks and things like that. So that sort of was a bit of a game changer. You could kind of see then it was going to be a tough few years
Things
coming.
Change, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
well, we talked a lot about industry stuff, but I know that you're still very passionate about surfing and try to do it as much as possible.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? Like how you've just stayed motivated for so long and still, especially like what I'm most curious about is, it's one thing if the waves are fun, nobody's, there's scenarios where surfing is easy, right? Where it's just no brainer, you're paddling out.
Yeah.
What about those days that are, maybe not, you have to find motivation somewhere? Where does that come from in you after all these years?
Well, I've always tried to keep pretty healthy, but I can't stand going to the gym, and I'm not a runner. I'm not going to, go and put my knees under that sort of stress. So I've really got it in my head that, I feel better mentally, I feel better physically if I'm surfing a lot. And therefore, like I've been at, I've done a lot of different business, had, ended up with 10,000 plus employees in the Billabong group. It's, you kind of do a lot of different things, but you realize that what's really important is your health, your communication with your family, and your support for your family. And, nothing else really matters. I mean, if do you need a bigger car? In the end, it doesn't really matter. But surfing clears the head, brings physical enjoyment, and I just love it. I think I'm still trying to. I can remember very clearly the day in Lakes Entrance, Victoria, when I did my first bottom turn on a green wave, and I'm still trying to get that feeling back. I was 11 years of age. I'm still trying to get it back today, and that I'm not, I'm not a big wave surfer or anything like that. I have been out in solid surf many times in my life, but I'm not chasing any of that. I think I'm just trying to get that first bottom turn back. And most times when I go out in the surf, I feel like I can, it's feeling good, so staying loose and staying physically active so I can keep surfing injury free is really the most important thing in my life. That and my family.
Wow. Well said.
Yeah. Well, it's important, huh?
58's motto is we surf every day. So.
Yeah. Not sure about the turf, but definitely surf.
The turf's there when you need to come in. It's fine.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great point to end. Thank you, Derek.
No worries. Thanks so much.
Cool.
Cheers.
Oh, good stuff. Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Oh. Yeah. No worries.
That point about